I learned it the hard way. When I started my journey, it was completely into a spiritual and Kundalini and energetic at that level. So I worked with a Buddhist teacher, I worked with a Zen teacher and an Advaita teacher. And Advaita, it's all like, it's everything is one, that there is no duality. But then there was like, oh, I am there certain times because that's how I interact with the world. So somehow these teachings were good, were amazing, and I we can have a lot of insights and aha realizations using those teachings. However, when you come back to the practical contemporary way of being a woman, as a mother or as a wife or as a corporate professional, business entrepreneur, community leader, or whatever we are doing, uh, it's very difficult to assume the no self identity or the no self experience that is usually spoken about in the Buddhist traditions. It's very difficult to say, oh, I don't have an identity. But then um, trauma healing and somatic healing, what it does is keeps the space open within our body, within our gut, within our heart, within our mind, keeps it open. So now the consciousness on the spiritual side, or the energy on the spiritual side, is now able to fluidly move across our gut, heart, and mind to express that wisdom using the instruments of mind, body, and gut in a way that is more closer to the society, community, family, workplace, wherever we are.
Namaste, sweet souls. My name is Shilpa, and you're listening to the Omni Mindfulness podcast. I am a mindset and meditation coach for professional women and mompreneurs. The purpose of this show is to offer stories and content that allows you to increase your awareness of your authentic self and be inspired by connecting to the personal and professional stories of other souls. Souls who are walking the walk and living everyday human experiences with inspired intentions. These are the stories that will expand your consciousness and spark within you to ask, what if? Each season, I offer content to help you create a holistic lifestyle that embodies spirituality, mindfulness, mindset, and energy awareness. Through my conversations with experts in their niche area and solo casts from yours truly, my intention is to help you holistically revitalize, reset, and relax your body, mind, and spirit. I'm your host and founder of Omni Mindfulness. So ask yourself, what if just one story could be the catalyst to shift the trajectory of my life? What if I become instrumental in serving other souls to realize their true self? And what if my soul's higher purpose is in the realization of Omni Mindfulness joy? It's never too late to rewrite your story. And now, today's episode. Welcome back, sweet souls. This is your host, Shilpa. I wanted to share some exciting news about a little challenge I'm running as I'm trying to get more people to discover this podcast and the conversations that inspire those who value personal growth. And the best way to do that is to leave reviews. You can leave a review on Spotify, Google Podcast, or Apple Podcast. So my request to you is to leave a review if you feel that you've received any value at all from these episodes of Omni Mindfulness. It would mean so much to me if you could write a little review regarding any episode that resonated with you. Please take a screenshot of that review and email it to me at omnimindfulness@gmail.com. In return, I will offer you my one-page guide to spark your meditation practice through Sankalpa. Sankalpa is a Sanskrit word for intention setting. Along with this, you'll receive a link to my guided meditation that will guide you through an intention setting meditation, positive affirmations, which you can practice daily. I guarantee that this gift will help you start a daily intention setting practice with a spark. It is my gift for you for being a listener, being a supporter, and of course, to enable you to manifest the best meditation practice. We are now in the 6th podcast season. Each month, my guests and I explore a facet of how mindfulness applies to modern day living. In April, my guests and I delve into the topic of eco-conscious living. The topic of courage and resiliency is covered in May, and wrapping up the season of mindfulness in June with the topic of heart-centered awareness. Stay tuned. My next guest, Sunita Sandeep, is a TEDx speaker and trauma-informed transformative executive coach, helping high-achieving and high-functioning women break from their inner struggles of anxiety, overwhelm, burnout, and fear to reach higher professional success with deep personal fulfillment. She is a certified meditation and mindfulness teacher, positive psychology practitioner, trauma support specialist, spiritual coach, and integrative wellness inner transformation coach. She's also a technical corporate leader, multi-pageant winner, Miss India, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Miss India, USA runner-up, a singer, wife, and a mom. She is a thought leader who has been actively challenging the culture of fallacy that stress, struggle, and burnout are a prerequisite for creativity, happiness, and success. Her mission is to explore and unleash human potential using ancient wisdom, scientific healing, and conscious embodiment. Coming from a high-performing corporate leadership background, being a trauma survivor herself, and having recovered from severe anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, insomnia, tension, myoneural syndrome, chronic pain, and chronic fatigue syndrome, she has had first-hand experience of a radical inner transformational journey. Her work continues to evolve in alignment with the real-life concerns of the modern-day seeker of peace and fulfillment in a increasingly chaotic world. She teaches truly life-transforming methodologies, intricately weaving Eastern practices of contemplative awareness inquiries and mind-body-heart energy connection with Western practices of somatic trauma, healing, positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, and emotional intelligence. And now, here is Sunita. Welcome, Sunita.
Thank you so much, Shilpa. So nice to be here and sharing our journeys and talking to another woman who's gone through similar journey. So thank you for having me here.
Oh, it's such an honor. And I feel like we share so many commonalities based on what I've read about your journey. So I would love for the audience to just get a glimpse of that. Maybe you can share that before we go deeper.
Yeah, I talk about this in detail in my TEDx talk, but I'll just repeat it here. Um, I came from a trauma background, and it was a medical error that happened, and I was told that my nerves were damaged, and I had numb, like literally my arm was numb, and there was no feelings and sensations. And I think this became the catalyst at the turning point for me, and recovering from whatever happened from those events to a constant PTSD kind of symptoms that we go through, and not knowing what is causing this, because PTSD symptoms develop later. And then it's sometimes, if you don't have the knowledge or the information, we don't even associate that to a previous event. Or it could be some kind of personality patterns or an archetypal patterns that we have. So we don't associate any of our current way of being to the previous way we were. And I think trauma, this incident kind of lit that energy, that whole movement within me to kind of go deeper within myself. It just became a catalyst, a doorway for me. And from then on, it's been about close to 15 years now on this journey, myself and also with other women, helping them. Quite a journey, that I can say. And I now help other high functioning women, mostly from the professional background, and help them to end their inner struggles of stress, anxiety, burnout, overwhelm, and any fears that they're having so that they can have higher professional impact, but with deeper personal fulfillment.
And what's wonderful about that in this time and age is I feel like often we've just buried that stress. Like I'm high performer. I've worked so hard to get here. I must keep striving.
Yeah, I must keep striving. And I think that exact mentality is what is not going to help post 40. Because we were known for working really hard. We were known for being the go-getters and chasing and getting things done kind of a mentality. Perfectionism or people pleasing, all of these archetypal patterns. And they really helped us to reach a career that we had. But then for our next growth and expansion into ourselves as both as a human and at the spiritual level, that's not going to take us anywhere. And I think that's the shift that probably we need to make through this journey of transformation.
And just when you said the awakening or awareness, whatever terminology you're using, it feels like that is the whole purpose of life. And sometimes we get lost thinking in the identity of that thing we've become in the corporate world.
Yeah. See, because I think what happens is unconsciously, those are the moments for us. So let's say when we were growing up and at 20 or so, or even younger, we were appreciated a lot, loved a lot, recognized a lot by achievements. And at 20, we did the same thing in our workplace, and then we were rewarded, we were recognized. And those moments of recognition for us brought us back to ourselves, brought us back to our inner truth, because now we could relax a little bit, have that relief, and then start seeing an experience. And I think somewhere we associate that part of being within us that is close to ourselves, intimate with ourselves, and intimate with the present moment, to the consequence of achieving. And that knot needs to be untied. And then we can realize that without any of the external stimulants, we can still feel intimate both to ourselves and to the world. And that is part of the awakening journey. And that's all it is, awakening to that truth within, awakening to the reality. And there are like so many layers of awakening that probably keeps happening. It's never going to stop, because it's expansion. The reality, the source is expanding. So are we. So yeah, that's probably what it is. The whole awakening is what it is.
It is. And I did listen to your TED talk, and I remember one line: to bring about any post-traumatic growth, we must really need to change our perspective on trauma. And that really stayed with me.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for hearing that and taking that line. For me, why I wrote this particular line, and I really mean so much about this line, is traditionally trauma is something that we are not supposed to be talking about. Trauma is not something that we can, if we go and share it with others, it feels more vulnerable for us, right? So we kind of hide it. In fact, even within myself, I hadn't spoken about it to anybody for a long time. Only like my family knew, and then later my husband kind of knew, hinted as to what was happening or so. I would never open up. And sometimes life puts you in these moments wherein you don't have an option but to open up. And for me, that happened in one of my pageants that I was taking part in. The pageant question was like, what is the most like difficult thing that you have experienced in your life? I'm like, oh my God, not this time, and especially in front of so many people. But you see, sometimes when such questions are asked, things that are within just naturally comes out. And for the first time, I saw myself talking about it. Not only me talking about it, in how people received it. And I started getting messages, oh my God, it's like I experienced something similar too. And I am able to relate to you. So I think once you start opening a little bit about trauma, that's like the number one stage. Open up, and then accept that, yes, this happened to me. that's the perspective shift that I talk about. Change your perspective. And then there is again a more masculine way of dealing with trauma. Like, oh, I had this trauma, so I'm going to be really masculine about it, and I will do whatever I need to in spite of my trauma. I'm going to do this and so on. Again, that's the shift that we need to change. We are not going to do anything in spite of trauma, but we're going to do with the trauma. We're going to do because of the trauma. And we're going to make space for it to stay with us and kind of guide us for our next part of the journey. And that was my whole talk about, like, change our perspective to trauma. That is when we can really have a post-traumatic growth.
And I also recall in there you had mentioned the vase metaphor, which
Yeah.
it was brilliant because I had a friend whose house had burned down to the ashes, and instead of becoming the victim emotionally, she took me to her home and we gathered different pieces of things that had fallen. And she made a beautiful vase out of those.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah. That metaphor really touched me so much when I read that, because all the time, even with the trauma, what we try to do is we try to get back to our original personality, our original me. This is how I used to be, and this is how I'm going to be from now on, even though I had a trauma. And that's not what it is. You become a completely different person, and trauma becomes that catalyst to take your journey into a completely different way of being. So you become completely new, completely creative, not the old person, and not again the victim, as you mentioned.
Yes. And how does this now fold into the journey of a woman who may perhaps even be Indian or from a culture where trauma is not talked about?
Yeah, I know the Indian culture, again, right now things are slowly changing. 15, 20 years back, we wouldn't hear any Indian person talking openly about anxiety or depression. Those were considered like some kind of a mental issues or so, and then we would not even come out and talk because we would be considered like something wrong in the society if you would talk about those things. And now, from a trauma perspective, again, usually when you start talking about trauma, you can get snubbed the first thing, or people will say, not again, like just don't talk about it, or so, or they'll say, you should not talk about it because that makes you feel a little bit weak and vulnerable. But trauma is just like any other event that has happened in your life. It is an event, and I think that's the mental mindset shift that we need to make, that it is an event that has happened. It has shaped me in who I am today. And talk about it so somebody else going through similar issue will have the courage and the resilience to take their life in a different way and not be stuck saying, oh, I'm traumatized or I'm a victim and I can't do anything in my life. And I think it's more of an awareness. It's slowly building up, Shilpa. I have a lot of Indian women clients too that I work with. They are opening up, of course, in a one-on-one kind of a situation and environment, but they are talking about it, whether it's abuse that they had growing up as a child, or even their spousal abuse. Sometimes that's kind of becoming common right now, somehow in a lot of women that I'm working with, or any kind of a traumatic near-death experiences, or an accident that happened, disaster, natural disasters, medical interventions, illnesses, chronic pains. Those all are kind of a trauma. And the other most important thing when I talk about trauma is a very subjective experience, which means what you feel as a trauma is not going to be what I feel as a trauma, as a traumatic event. And it completely depends on how each person processes that and can make space for those traumatic events to just pass through us. And it's individual, it's completely different for each person. But then we somehow come up with this, or traumatic events means only A, B, C, D. And if it doesn't fall into that, then it's not a trauma. but it's completely dependent on the person experiencing it. That's why it's a very subjective experience. So I think that again, that's a mindset that needs to shift. Um,
Yeah, and I was recently talking to a trauma specialist, and she explained to me something that I was like, this light bulb went off in my head, because even though I have gone through my set of things, I dismissed anything. I would be like, I have no trauma.
yes.
I
Yeah.
mean, and it might be because that masculine side where I'm always wanting to be tough. But she explained, she said there's this big T and small T's, there's a series of traumas, and they're
Yes.
how we perceive them, perhaps. But sometimes the awareness that that is a trauma, and either unconsciously or consciously, it may be affecting me.
Oh, yeah. The unconscious trauma. Oh, I would love to explore more on the unconscious trauma because sometimes trauma is visible. Like, okay, I can talk about the trauma that I had and an experience, or you can talk about it. That's more like a visible trauma. The unconscious trauma literally leads our life today. And these are not big events, like as you mentioned, those are not the big T trauma. This is the small T trauma. How what events happened when we were growing up? What are the belief structures that we developed as a coping mechanism? And in the lot of high performers and high achievers, we have this identity that, like, there is you're hardworking, or you're a perfectionist, or you're a people pleasing. You know how to get things done, and so they are stuck there for whatever reason, and that's literally is leading their life today, and they're not even unconscious about it. They're
No.
like completely unconscious. And then I was speaking to another podcast person on this. Trauma is literally, these kind of unconscious trauma is literally frozen in our bodies,
Yes.
and we need practices to kind of thaw them and bring it to the surface,
Hmm.
and then kind of have a lot of inquiry practices to talk to them, to wake up the trauma, thaw them, and then wake up the trauma, let the trauma speak to you, and then give the trauma a space to move through you. Um, that's so much needed, especially for the unconscious kind of trauma that's sitting within.
And I do meditation, but recently I introduced a more deeper breath work, not just pranayama, but I almost feel like it's more scientific, kind of
Yeah,
working through the body. And each time I do it, I will find my head thinking about a past trauma story. And I'm like,
yeah,
part of my brain's like, stop it.
yeah,
When I start doing the breath work, tears come out.
yeah,
And
because your body is releasing.
it's a
Yeah,
release.
our bodies.
Yeah, but then that means that the disease is releasing.
Yeah, the stuckness is releasing, right? And which in turn will cause diseases. Yes, correct. So it's literally the diseases are releasing.
I mean, if obviously if it stays there and there too long, it turns into a real disease, but sometimes it's there and we're not aware.
Yeah, we're not even aware of it. Those are the difficult traumas to deal with.
Yeah.
And it needs a lot of inquiry-based, intuitive questioning techniques to kind of get that to the surface and then see, oh my God, because usually when women come to me saying like, I feel stuck and I don't know what it is, I'm just stuck. I know I have to do these things, and I know, and that's where my mindset is, and that's where I really want to do, but it just feels like something is pulling me back. Like I just feel stuck. I just can't take that next step. And then they go into all of these procrastination techniques and do this and get up at 5:30 a.m. and then could do this gym and this yoga, this everything. But at the end of the day, it's like look into what is keeping you stuck. And that requires a little bit of that probably help for a lot of women.
And that awareness comes in and sometimes sparks a light on things like, am I avoiding? Am I resisting? And you're
Yeah.
unconscious. I know I've been doing that.
Yeah. I wrote about this article, like, are you stressed or are you resisting?
Mhm, mhm.
You're resisting. That's all stress is. And
Yeah.
we keep resisting. Unknowingly, we resist. That's what we are made to do as we grew up. And I think the different stages of our consciousness, We want to develop that egoic self. We want to, I mean, in the sense, it's a part of the evolution. We go through that evolution. Initially, we come in with absolutely no kind of a self-awareness, who we are as a, like, 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. And then a 2-year-old, it's like, oh, it's my doll, it's my toy, it's mine. And oh, this is me when I look at myself in the mirror. So we start developing a little bit more of a self-awareness and the, oh, this is me kind of a concept. And then over the course of like till we reach maybe middle age or so, it's like we are strengthening our egoic self, which is a part of the evolution. And then the rest of our life is kind of integrating the egoic self, not completely getting rid of it, but integrating the egoic self. So it becomes kind of transparent, so that the consciousness can just come in, use it when it needs to, leave it when it doesn't need to, and be very free.
Yes. And that's part of our expansion.
Yes.
As
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, as humans. Carl Jung, he puts that in a beautiful quote. He says, the first part of our journey is developing positive ego, or a sense of self. And the next part of our journey is now to get kind of understand and integrate and kind of get rid of the stickiness of the grasp and holdingness of that ego, even though it's positive.
Yeah. Yes. And that's interesting with the culture, like being raised in Indian culture. Some perceptions I had was, oh, ego's bad, but sometimes it's a survival mechanism.
Ego is a survival mechanism. I know a lot of spiritual teachings, if you go into a very traditional spiritual teachings, there are these pointers that'll say ego death needs to happen for the resurrection to happen, or annihilation of ego needs to happen, or you're not your body, you're not your mind, you're not your emotions, right? These all are just pointers so that you realize the other side of the spectrum. Instead of completely getting attached to our bodies and minds and emotions, the shift needs to happen wherein we say we are not just the mind, body, and emotions. We are much beyond. But then the pointers that are given become the way of living, wherein some ego will come, some self will come and then say, oh, I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, I'm not my emotions. And then you stick there, you get stuck there. And then everything else is now seen from that perspective, and you hold on to that perspective. The pointer became your life. Um, and I think that's where we see a lot of um, misunderstandings about the teachings and pointers.
Yes. And I see more and more in my own deeper reading and understanding is that there's the inner self connected to the source. And then there's the outer self that helps you function as a container and that is integrated with society. But when you lose the two connections, that's when life feels like what I call wobbly or disconnected. And it can be very painful because you're not connected to the source.
Yeah, you're not connected to the source. Yeah. And I think much of the people who are going through this awakening journey that's where the suffering is happening. They've lost the connection to that deeper part within themselves, and they know that they have lost the connection. And the outer self is just doing what it needs to do on the outer level. And that is completely cut off from this inner self, which is more connected to the source. And there is this continuous conflict that is happening. This is what I think I need to be doing, but you know what? This is what I want to do. No, but this is what you need to do. Oh, but this is what I want to do. You see, there's a continuous inner conflict that is happening, and no wonder we are getting stuck.
And I imagine you've seen women in the space, especially Indian women, given that there's other cultural expectations often that come into play, that your life, and to make it simplistic, is full of to-do lists on the exterior. And you forget that just going to a yoga class isn't enough, because maybe I'm not connecting to the inside.
I know. Yeah, yoga classes just become this. It's like more like a lose your pounds kind of a class, right?
Yeah.
Than connecting to that inner self and our inner source. And I think that's what it has become, which is kind of sad that the yoga is the merger. Yoga means the merger, the unity, the non-duality.
Yeah.
And yoga helps to connect to that non-dual place through our bodies. But the way yoga is taught, that deeper connection is not being awakened in every class. But there are very few teachers who do that. One of my teacher, she came from Iyengar yoga background. She did that, and at that point of time, I wasn't understanding like what she was going through, what she said she was doing. But I would just follow her instructions, and every time she would say, go within and then feel within. And at that point of time, I did not know how to go within and feel within. But I think over the course of years, now I'm kind of like, oh my God, this is what she meant. And I think more and more you do that and you hear that everywhere from everybody around, then something within you lights up and it's like, oh my God, this is me. Where was I? Oh, I was always this. How did I forget that?
And you just spoke to what I felt when I fell in love with yoga at very young age. But I remember going to yoga classes when I was going through some tough time in graduate school, and I started going again. And one of the teachers said, "Breathe into it." I'm like, "Breathe into what?"
Breathe into what?
But I
Yeah.
think, but now I get it. Like if my lower back,
No,
I'll breathe into it.
breathe into it. You become intimate with that experience. You allow that experience. You go into that experience. You become one with that experience, right? That is what it is when they say breathe into it.
And breath is movement. And when you move that energy through, it's allowing
Yeah.
to release what's stuck.
Yeah. And breath, especially, is a very good source for Kundalini energy practices.
Mhm.
It And I think Kundalini is also one important part of this whole awakening journey, the energetic part, because that helps us to stabilize
Mhm.
whatever insights we have had. And breath work naturally gives the space for that Kundalini energy to slowly kind of crawl up
Mhm.
and down.
Mhm.
And then we feel that when we do extremely deeper breathing, and especially when we go into the stage of breathing in such a way, I don't know if I can talk about it, but when your breathing can stop also,
Yes.
right? Your breathing can stop for some time, and you can literally feel the energy kind of taking over
Yes. It's called
more
the
than the breath,
breathless
right?
state. Yes.
Breathless state, yeah. So I think through the breathing, once you start reaching the breathless, then the Kundalini slowly starts raising, and Kundalini does a lot of work, the healing work by itself.
Mhm.
Um, some of the things, because when we go down to the deeper level of awakening, much of it is pre-emotional and even pre-cognitive. It's more at the body level, and I think Kundalini is something, and we usually don't talk about this
Yeah.
externally. We don't talk about it this or with easily among people. So I think it's good to raise. It's good that we both are speaking about it, at
Yes.
least in our culture, and then take it and then say that it's not something to be feared about.
Mhm.
It's a very natural energy that is there within us, and it's a very natural movement.
Absolutely. And I think there's a growing awareness, perhaps even I feel like because I live in California where there's a lot of yoga out here,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
it's a very common thing where I'll walk into a class and people will be practicing these states. However, yeah, like you said, it's not something yet that's so common, especially
Yeah.
I feel like coming from the corporate world.
Coming from the corporate world, yeah, it is slowly changing, Shilpa, and I think more somehow the movement is mostly starting from women more than men. That's what I observe. More and more women are experiencing this. They're not able to articulate and put it into words as to what is happening, but then they are feeling energetically connected they are feeling like, that the symptoms like anxiety and depression, they are going through that. They are giving a little bit more understanding into healing, into mindfulness practices, into non-duality. Also, although they don't use the word non-duality, they talk about it in as mindfulness. Be mindful, be one with what you're doing, or be in the flow. Those are the words that they use rather than using non-duality.
Yes. Of course, you're speaking my language. So I'm really
Oh
enjoying.
yeah, the mindfulness teacher, yes.
Well, everything you said, being in the flow, being present, and it's a daily practice. So while I understand it, and I know the techniques, I have to do the work every day because it's a daily practice.
It's a day, and it'll always be a practice till we die, right?
Yeah.
It'll always be a practice. Michael Singer, one of my favorite teachers, um, there was an article that he wrote or he spoke about, in which he says your commitment to be conscious.
It's a commitment.
No matter what's happening, like whatever triggers are pulling you away from
Yeah.
that center, are you committed to be conscious? That's the practice. That's literally the practice of mindfulness. Are you conscious? Are you aware? Are you present? No matter what's happening.
Yeah.
And we will keep getting pulled,
Yes.
because that's our conditioning, that's our body, that's our mind, our emotional body, our somatic body, a trauma body that has gone through so much trauma, so much baggage that it has. It'll keep pulling us away from that center of being conscious. But I think our work is, oh, in this moment, was I conscious or was I lost? Oh, can I? Because once you're able to achieve that state of being conscious, the rest everything flows. Because right now what's happening, Shilpa, is people are more focusing on what they need to do to their mind to change their belief structures, what they need to do to their heart to manage and cope up with their emotional intelligence, right? Instead, focus a little bit more onto the source where this is all coming from, because mind, emotions, and body sensations are just instruments of your state of being. That's all they are. If I tell you to go get a memory of how you were as a child, your mind will produce such thoughts and images. Your emotions will produce those kind of emotions, and sometimes your body sensations will give you those kind of body sensations. That's all they are. And if you change your state of being into a more feminine way, more receptive, more present, more conscious, we don't have to do much work on the mind or the emotions or the body, right?
And I think of the physiology, just the mind, and the heart are more of the transmitters,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they pick up on the feelings, and the feelings then turn into what, like we're talking about, it turns into some form of energy. We're vibrational beings. So one of the things I love that you bring into this conversation is that you bring the Eastern philosophy of the inner source in our inner kundalini and our energy. But there's also the awareness, and I did a whole series on this that we'll talk about later, on this
beautiful.
somatic body. So
Yes.
making the connection between the Eastern and Western is wonderful.
Yeah. And I think I learned it the hard way. I learned it the hard way. When I started my journey, it was completely into a spiritual and Kundalini and energetic at that level. So I worked with a Buddhist teacher, I worked with a Zen teacher and an Advaita teacher. And Advaita, it's all like, it's everything is one, that there is no duality. But then there was like, oh, I am there certain times because that's how I interact with the world. And so somehow these teachings were good, were amazing, and we can have a lot of insights and aha realizations using those teachings. However, when you come back to the practical contemporary way of being a woman, as a mother, or as a wife, or as a corporate professional, business entrepreneur, community leader, or whatever we are doing, uh, it's very difficult to assume the no self identity or the no self experience that is usually spoken about in the Buddhist traditions. It's very difficult to say, oh, I don't have an identity. But then um, trauma healing and somatic healing, what it does is keeps the space open within our body, within our gut, within our heart, within our mind, keeps it open. So now the consciousness on the spiritual side, or the energy on the spiritual side, is now able to fluidly move across our gut, heart, and mind to express that wisdom using the instruments of mind, body, and gut in a way that is more closer to the society, community, family, workplace, wherever we are. And I think that integration is where it's the embodying awakening. Awakening is realization of who you are at the deepest level, at the level of your consciousness. But then how do you embody that in our day-to-day living? That's where a lot of trauma healing needs to happen, conditional healing, somatic healing needs to happen. And when you merge that, when that integration happens, our ego is no longer a problem. Ego is a helper. Personal will is now integrated with the big will, or the God will, or whatever we say that is, which means now this will is used to do certain things that's coming from a different place. And intuitively we understand, because whatever we wanted to do from our personal will doesn't happen, and something else kind of takes over and then kind of nudges us, and when we follow that path it becomes very effortless, and that's the integration. And that is very less spoken of. Either you're completely on the spiritual side or whether you're completely on the healing side, and both have their own dark side. You can be on this healing, continuously healing one after the other, healing, and not realize your truth, or you can realize your truth, but there is no way to embody that in your day-to-day living. And for me, the most important part was, how do I integrate this? Because this is exactly what I want to spread to women, and this is what is needed in living our life, as spiritual beings, in having this beautiful, wonderful human experience with all its emotions, the good emotions and the bad emotions, kindness, and at the same time feeling envy and jealousy, hate, at the same time feeling love, right? That's the embodiment.
And that's just essentially wraps the essence of awareness. Like when you and I started the conversation, you so beautifully articulated that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful talking through such deep levels, such deep layers, at the mental, at the emotional, at our gut level, at the energy level, and at the level of consciousness. So all the 5 levels.
It's the essence of awareness. Is absolutely. What words of wisdom do you have, or any insights can you provide for, perhaps there's a woman, Indian woman listening to this, and she's just now leaning into this understanding. There's something that I can open up to with my trauma.
Yeah. Trauma, use your trauma as a catalyst, or use any kind of a suffering or an inner struggle that you're going through as a catalyst. Because sometimes, although it feels really horrible and bad to go through it, there is actually a hidden power, a hidden strength that will be revealed to you when you kind of accept that, embrace the trauma within you, and kind of heal the trauma within you and take it with you. And the first step is acceptance and awareness, and talking about it, and sharing that with somebody that you can go and somebody that you can trust, rather than opening up to people who may not be very receptive to it. Go to somebody who the other person trusts, who you trust, and then open up.
And often the talk therapy doesn't always work, but if you are within a community of like-minded individuals, like you were saying, the internal inner source and balancing that with the somatic body and understanding how to work
Yeah.
on both.
Yeah. 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 That's the essence of everything.
Yeah,
Um, Ancient wisdom with scientific healing.
that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I will definitely invite you back again, especially because of when you talked about embodiment. I have a whole series on that coming up.
Absolutely. I would love to. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shilpa. And I really love what you're doing with your podcast and spreading that awareness more than anything, and making others feel that they're not alone in this journey. And there's always help that they can get. And it doesn't always have to be more from like, just swallow a pill kind of a help. It can be more about really healing ourselves, because our bodies and mind and emotions are made to heal naturally. And once you have access to that, you can continue a journey with less suffering.
Well, I recommend anyone listening to this podcast, please check out Sunita's um, key information. That'll be in the show notes. She's got wealth of information. I see that you also have a ebook, so I'll definitely include the link to your ebook.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shilpa. Everything is on my website also, www.sunitasandeep.com. If somebody feels connected to work with me, that's the place to reach me.
Wonderful, Sunita. I'll have you back again soon. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much, Shilpa, for having me here.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in. Check out the links in the description and please subscribe, follow, and share. And continue to practice Omni Mindfulness.